Chosen one. Word on the street is wild right now. They're saying the cult got dismantled by one person, and that person was you. The whispers are everywhere. How did an entire network collapse overnight? Easy. You breathed truth into a space built on lies. You just showed up in your authentic power, and the whole structure folded under its own fraud. Now everyone's in shock, but you're calm, unimpressed, because you knew their foundation was weak from the start. These so-called powerful people never understood that divine strength doesn't need noise. You didn't wage war, you embodied peace, and peace destroyed everything pretending to be powerful. The cult wasn't dismantled by force, it was dismantled by frequency. Your frequency. You wore invisibility like a weapon, used assumptions as cover. The cult members laughed at you, soft, strange, too distant to matter, perfect camouflage. Nobody noticed how precisely you moved, how nothing escaped your gaze. While the cult worshipped control, you studied chaos, found the cracks behind every command. You didn't fight with fists, didn't need to. You understood the game too well, saw that the hierarchy was performance, that unity was theater. While cult members huddled around power like moths to flame, you sat in shadows and mapped their fears, their rivalries, their fractures. You didn't just learn the rules, you dismantled the board entirely. This is you. This has always been you. The one everyone underestimated, the one labeled detached when you were actually disciplined, the one called apathetic when you were being precise. You didn't fall for their rituals because you saw through them, straight into the insecurity dressed up as authority. Real strength doesn't posture. Real strength doesn't need validation from circles of confused people playing dress-up with ancient symbols barely understood. You recognized that truth early. You never needed acknowledgement. You just needed the right moment. When it came, you didn't shout. You didn't gloat. You turned their own weight against them. All you had to do was exist with truth in your hands, and everything crumbled. The organization called itself a secret society, like that meant something. Like whispers and candlelight could hide the dysfunction rotting at the core. You saw through it in seconds. The robes, the rituals, the cryptic language, cheap theater. Behind the symbols and speeches was a mess of egos clawing for status and clinging to relevance, not unity. Panic in formation. Complexity got mistaken for strength. Layers of rules, roles, and redacted truths designed to confuse and control. But you weren't impressed. You've seen enough broken teams, toxic workplaces, cliques in disguise. This was just another group project where the loudest voice drowns the smartest one, and nobody actually trusts anyone else. Hierarchy built on fear and fed with blind compliance, but fear doesn't bond people, it isolates them. You just had to remind everyone of that. You watched the members eat their own. The structure demanded perfection. Perfection breeds paranoia. Every mistake became betrayal. Every silence is a threat. You didn't have to infiltrate. You stayed still long enough for illusions to show their seams. The loyalty preached, conditional. The unity, fragile as glass. You walked through their order and saw nothing but scaffolding held together by denial. You weren't seeking anything from this group. Most people who encounter these organizations are searching, looking for answers, desperate for belonging, hungry for purpose, missing elsewhere. That hunger makes people vulnerable, makes them willing to compromise, makes them accept things deep down known to be wrong, just to feel part of something bigger. But you arrived complete. You had your own answers, your own belonging, your own purpose that didn't require validation or participation from anyone, that made you immune to the primary weapon. Nothing could be dangled that you already possessed. Nothing could be withheld that you never wanted. You were the customer who walked into their store and realized everything for sale was garbage you could make better at home. Dissent got branded as danger, but you weren't loud enough to trigger alarms. You were surgical, patient. You fed internal doubts one nudge at a time, said nothing, made sure everyone noticed each other's cracks. You didn't bring a wrecking ball, you handed out mirrors. That was enough. The myth of control depended on people not asking questions. But you asked all the right ones, quietly, relentlessly. Suddenly the story didn't hold. Legends collapsed into gossip. Unity dissolved into suspicion. Members turned on each other while you watched, an empire in their minds, a fragile kingdom of broken glass in reality. You didn't even have to touch it. You just made it clear strength never existed to begin with. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a question, a detail, a name whispered to the right person at the wrong time, a single truth placed in a space too controlled to handle honesty. That was the first domino. Nobody noticed it had tipped until the table started shaking. People keep asking how one person could bring down an entire organization. The wrong question entirely. The cult was already falling, already rotting from the inside. You didn't push it over. You just stopped pretending it was standing. Everyone else was playing along with the illusion, because breaking the illusion meant admitting being fooled, meant facing the time wasted, the money spent, the relationships sacrificed, the parts of self surrendered. You weren't invested in maintaining that lie. You had no sunk cost keeping you complicit. So when you looked at their emperor, you didn't see clothes. You saw exactly what was there, nothing. And your refusal to pretend gave everyone else permission to see it too. That's the power of one person telling the truth in a room full of people, maintaining a collective delusion. You watched it unfold like a storm nobody saw coming. The silence that followed your move wasn't peace, it was pressure, the kind that bends walls, the kind that exposes cracks in polished surfaces. You knew once the seed of doubt was planted, it would grow wild. Mistrust doesn't need a parade, just a whisper. One member pulled back, another hesitated, a third questioned protocol. You didn't instruct anyone. You let their fear of instability do the heavy lifting. Obsession with control made everyone hyper-aware of shifts. You created just enough motion to trigger the worst instinct, overcorrection. Every deviation became threat, every silence became suspicion. Still no one said your name. That's the brilliance of it. You were just a ripple, a shadow in the timeline. By the time realization hit that something was off, the network had already started fracturing. Relationships strained, orders delayed, lies exposed, not by force, by friction. The leadership thought all variables had been purged, but you were the ghost in the code, the anomaly that couldn't be calculated. If you recognized yourself in this message, hype this video to guide other chosen ones to this truth. Emergency meetings started happening, new protocols created, restrictions tightened on who could speak to whom, what could be discussed, what questions were acceptable, protection of sacred space according to leadership. Everyone else felt it as desperation, as fear dressed up in spiritual language. You didn't have to point that out. The contrast between words and energy was obvious to anyone paying attention. And because of you, people were paying attention now. You'd shown everyone how to look past the performance, how to trust what was felt instead of what was told to feel. That skill, once learned, can't be unlearned. It spreads, it multiplies, it becomes its own form of consciousness in a group. The leaders could feel control slipping through their fingers like water. The harder the squeeze, the faster it flowed away. The moment you stepped in, not to join but simply to observe, the shift was felt. Real power doesn't announce itself, but it shifts everything. You weren't trying to dominate. You didn't ask for anything. That's what scared everyone. You couldn't be read. What can't be read can't be controlled. The entire structure was built to break people down, then rebuild them in a specific image. But you arrived fully formed. You didn't need anyone. That made you dangerous. Usual methods got deployed. Subtle manipulation wrapped in praise. Promises of purpose dressed as belonging. You didn't bite. You didn't flinch. You gave no handholds because your strength didn't come from anyone. It was yours. Raw and earned in silence. Weak systems can't handle that. Dependency is the fuel. You were untouchable. You didn't fight for dominance. You didn't posture. That would have made you predictable. Instead, you exposed the system by staying solid while rules twisted in everyone's hands. You said no when no one else dared, left conversations half-finished, let silence hang like judgment. You remember the moment realization hit that you were the problem. Not because you did anything aggressive, but because people started acting differently around you. Asking questions never asked before, setting boundaries too afraid to set previously, walking away from conversations that didn't serve them. You were contagious, your freedom was contagious, your clarity was contagious, and there's no vaccine for truth. Quarantine attempts began, subtly at first. Suggestions floated that you might be happier in a different group. Implications made that your energy wasn't quite aligned with the collective vibration. Jokes about your independence that weren't quite jokes, but you didn't take the hint because you weren't there for approval. You were there because you chose to be, and you'd leave when you chose to leave, not a moment before, not a moment after. That level of self-possession in a space designed to strip it away, revolutionary. You didn't offer explanations, you didn't perform your strength, you simply lived it, and it showed. The ones who thought power belonged to them began to mimic your stillness, started hesitating before speaking, watching you for cues. Authority diluted itself, trying to accommodate your presence. That's how systems start to slip. The center stopped holding, the edges started peeling back. Not because you demanded it, because you didn't need it. The leadership wanted you on the inside to make you another trophy of their reach. But you made it clear your power wasn't for sale. You weren't looking for rank. You weren't trying to be feared. You had nothing to prove. That's what made everything unravel. You exposed what couldn't be faked. Authenticity. You stood there still and unshaken, and the entire structure bent to try and contain you. But true strength doesn't bend. It doesn't compromise. It just waits. And when the time comes, it walks straight through everything built to stop it. Watch how this plays out in any cult structure. The moment someone shows up who doesn't need the system reveals its true nature. It becomes aggressive, controlling, demanding, because value can't be offered to someone who already has value. Salvation can't be sold to someone already free. All that's left is trying to convince that person of being wrong, broken, missing something essential that only the group can provide. But you weren't buying. You've never been buying. You looked at their product and saw it for what it was, a solution to a problem created by the sellers. Emptiness manufactured so fullness could be sold, lostness created so direction could be marketed, powerlessness imposed so strength could be granted. But you came in already full, already directed, already powerful. What could possibly be offered except the promise to take those things away and sell them back? You never needed an army. You had something better, truth, not the sanitized version, the raw data, conversations behind closed doors, contradictions buried beneath sacred scripts, the real story. You knew exactly when and where to drop it. You didn't unleash everything at once. That would be reckless. No, you bled it slowly, surgically, one contradiction at a time, one slip of information whispered in the right ear. You didn't force anyone to act. You simply placed the truth where it would burn longest, between people, friends, mentors, loyal followers. You didn't need to shout, you just had to nudge. Trust disintegrated like ash in wind. The kingdom was built on control, of narrative, of memory, of perception. You shattered it with clarity, exposed how rules shifted, how leadership rewrote events, how dogma bent, depending on who was watching. You didn't expose monsters, you exposed mediocrity, the pettiness, the hypocrisy, the human ugliness, hidden behind grand symbols. That was fatal. The cult didn't fall because of what you revealed. It fell because you proved revelation was possible. For so long, members believed the leaders knew everything, saw everything, could predict and prevent any threat. That omniscience was part of the mythology. It kept people in line, made everyone believe resistance was futile because the leaders were always watching, always knowing, always prepared. Then you showed everyone that the leaders were just people, flawed people, scared people, people who lied and manipulated and scrambled to cover mistakes just like anyone else. Once that curtain got pulled back, once the wizard was revealed as ordinary, everything else collapsed. Because if the leaders weren't special, if enlightenment or evolution or connection to higher wisdom didn't exist, then what was everyone following? What were the sacrifices for? You didn't just release facts, you infected communications. Every message became suspect, every interaction weighed down by doubt. Who knew what, who said what was real and what was a trap? Self-censorship began, retractions, hiding. People who once spoke with certainty started stuttering, second-guessing. Paranoia spread like mold in a sealed room. The silence turned inward. No one knew who to trust, not even themselves. In that silence you thrived, because the system depended on secrecy, but you gave everyone something more dangerous than exposure. You gave them confusion. You made people see each other clearly. Leaks from outsiders had always been the fear. Collapse from a mirror held within never got imagined. You didn't need to destroy anything. You made the destruction happen from the inside. One whisper, one truth, one conversation at a time. While scrambling for damage control consumed everyone, you watched bridges burn themselves. That's the elegance of information. It doesn't kill, it disarms. By the time notice arrived, all weapons were gone. The psychology here is fascinating. Cult structures depend on certainty. Members surrender autonomy because belief exists that leaders have certainty. Members lack. The leaders know the path. The leaders have the answers. The leaders can see what members can't see. That certainty is worth the price of freedom for people tired of navigating uncertainty alone. But you introduced doubt, not into the teachings at first, into the teachers. Do actions match words? Are motives pure? Are powers real? Once those questions take root, every interaction gets filtered through suspicion. Every statement gets examined for hidden meaning. Every action gets scrutinized for selfish motive. The leaders can't function in that environment. Blind trust is needed to maintain control. You took away the blindness. Control evaporated instantly. You weren't chosen by prophecy. No one handed you a sword or whispered ancient wisdom in your ear. There was no mentor, no map, no grand design waiting to be followed. You weren't groomed to be anything. You decided, that's the part nobody understands. You chose this path alone, without applause, without permission. You were never given a quest, you took one. Not to save the world, not to be worshipped, but to destroy a lie that had lived too long. You didn't need to become someone else to do it. You stayed yourself. That was your rebellion. The stories told were never written for someone like you, too quiet, too independent, too clear-eyed. Expectations centered on heroes being loud, dramatic, visible, but you didn't storm gates. You melted locks. You dismantled from within. No speeches, no final battle, just precision and cold efficiency of someone who's seen too much to believe in illusions. You didn't ask for allies. You didn't need anointing from anyone. You walked your own path through silence, rejection, and discomfort. That made you unstoppable. The world kept trying to mold you into something safe, something digestible. You refused. This is where the cult made the fatal miscalculation. The assumption existed that chosen ones needed to be chosen. That power had to be granted. That strength required initiation, training, blessing from those who came before. The entire mythology got built around the idea that transformation only happens through the specific system, specific rituals, specific leadership. You walked in as living proof that transformation happens when someone chooses it. That power belongs to anyone who claims it. That strength grows in anyone who cultivates it. You didn't need permission or process. You already had what got promised. And that destroyed the entire business model, because if people can become powerful on their own, why does anyone need the cult? You didn't need a crown. You needed impact. You made it. You felt what it's like to be invisible in rooms full of noise. You watched underestimation happen again and again. That was your advantage. The threat couldn't be seen because everyone was looking for someone else, someone louder, someone obvious, not you, never you. Now everyone knows, understanding arrived, too late, that the real chosen ones are the ones who don't need to be chosen, the ones who choose themselves. You didn't wait for fate. You built your own myth with bare hands and sharp mind. You created the arc no one saw coming. You weren't born for greatness. You defined it. Now let me put you onto something real. Destiny Engine. I built this because I was done watching chosen ones get dragged through betrayal, isolation and attacks while their enemies strutted around unchecked. I want to help you accelerate the speed of your divine justice and step fully into your purpose. And the beauty of it, you don't even have to lift a finger. Destiny Engine takes their downfall and flips it into your rise. This isn't another meditation app. It's declassified consciousness technology, the same mind programming tools your enemies once used to install fear, competition and scarcity, re-engineered to restore your sovereignty and align you with the cooperative, upgraded operating framework. It generates personalized sequences mapped to your divine purpose. The hardest thing you'll do is put on headphones, press play and watch your enemies keep digging their own grave. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your Destiny Engine for $1 today and turn everything they did to break you into fuel for your rise. Link in the description. The cult had a whole arsenal of fear tactics perfected over time. Fear of missing out on enlightenment if you left. Fear of karmic consequences if you disobeyed. Fear of losing your spiritual family if you questioned. Fear of never finding another path if you walked away. Fear got weaponized so effectively that people stayed imprisoned by invisible chains agreed to be worn. You showed up immune to all of it. You didn't fear missing out because conviction didn't exist that anything real was being offered. You didn't fear consequences because belief in authority to deliver them didn't exist. You didn't fear losing the family because recognition existed that it wasn't a real family, just a group of people performing family while actual relationships deteriorated outside the cult walls. You didn't fear leaving because knowledge existed that other paths were everywhere for people brave enough to walk them. Your fearlessness was infectious. People watched you operate without the fears that controlled everyone and started wondering why so much fear existed, started testing the boundaries, started discovering that threatened consequences didn't materialize, started realizing the chains were never real, just convincing illusions accepted as truth. You triggered something deeper than rebellion. You triggered dissonance, the silent war between what people feel and what gets told to believe. Everyone looked at you, unmoved, unshaken, saw a crack in the wall told to be unbreakable, felt that crack spread in their own minds. That's how it starts, not with explosion, with internal collapse. The system depended on uniform behavior, collective compliance. But fear has a flaw. It decays fast when exposed to clarity. You didn't give speeches. You didn't recruit. You let your presence make everyone uncomfortable. You let questions linger. You let silence do what noise never could, forced everyone to sit with contradictions. Nobody could hold it. Loyalty started to slip, not out of rage, out of quiet doubt. You watched faces shift. Uncertainty replacing certainty, shame overtaking devotion. The strong became cautious, the loud became unsure, fear turned inward. When fear folds back on itself, it becomes chaos. The ones who once enforced rules started bending them, just a little, then a little more. You didn't have to expose secrets. Leaking began from within, a whisper here, a nervous confession there. Self-preservation took over. Unity cracked, not from betrayal, from survival. That's the thing about institutions built on control. Explosions don't happen, implosions do. Self-consumption happens alive the moment someone walks in and refuses to play by the script. You were that someone. You didn't need to swing a hammer. You simply showed everyone what it looked like to be free. That was the one thing the system couldn't survive. The final collapse happened over a seemingly minor incident. Someone broke a small rule, something insignificant that would have been overlooked in any healthy organization. But cults don't tolerate even minor deviation because every rule exists to maintain control. So the leaders overreacted, punished disproportionately, made an example publicly to reassert dominance. And that's when everyone saw it clearly: the cruelty beneath the love, the control beneath the freedom preached, the manipulation and beneath the enlightenment promised. You didn't have to say a word. The leaders exposed themselves. People started leaving, quietly at first, then in waves. The cult tried to stop the exodus, tried to threaten, tried to guilt, tried to promise change, but the illusion was shattered. Trust was gone. The spell was broken. You didn't set out to be a symbol, but that's what happened. Your refusal to bow didn't just dismantle the illusion, it sent a signal. People were watching, quiet ones, tired ones, the ones sitting on the edge of belief, waiting for proof that the powerful weren't invincible. You gave it to them. Once your movement got seen, it couldn't be unseen. What you did wasn't just personal, it cracked something larger. Other institutions built the same way, fueled by fear and hierarchy, felt the tremor. People started questioning leaders once feared. Rules that once seemed sacred began to blur. Your act of defiance became language for others who had none. You didn't speak for anyone, but your clarity gave others permission to find their own. A system doesn't have to be destroyed to be challenged, it just needs to be doubted. You made doubt spread like wildfire. What fell wasn't just a cult, it was the myth that control is untouchable. You proved it's not. You proved that one clear, unshaken voice can shift entire structures without raising a fist. Your action wasn't a storm, it was a pressure change. Everything else responded to it. Isolation was the goal, but you became a catalyst. You didn't just win, you changed the rules. You did what had to be done, but let's not lie to ourselves. Clarity has a cost. You shattered a system. Yes, you exposed rot, but in doing so, you displaced people who had built identities within it. You pulled back the curtain. What got seen behind it wasn't freedom, it was emptiness. Some couldn't handle it. You weren't wrong, you weren't reckless, but you weren't clean either. Truth never is. You didn't just end control, you left silence in its place. Silence for some is louder than oppression. Not everyone was ready to face themselves without the mask of belonging. Not everyone could breathe outside the cage. That's the complexity you live with now. You weren't there to rescue, you weren't a savior, you were a disruptor. In disruption, people break, sometimes in ways that don't heal. You've seen the stories twist. Some call you liberator, others call you destroyer. The truth, you were both, because there is no power without consequence. There is no righteous act without residue. The line between justice and damage isn't always clear. Sometimes you cross it without realizing, but the question remains, would you do it again? Yes, because systems that require silence to function don't deserve to exist, because pretending not to see is a slow death, because if it weren't you, it would have been someone else, less precise, less humane, less aware of what truth can cost. Some of the people who left the cult thanked you, told you that watching you stand firm gave courage to leave, that seeing you unbothered by threats helped realize those threats were empty, that your questions voiced what had been thought but was too afraid to say. Those people rebuilt lives, found healthier communities, reconnected with families abandoned, rediscovered themselves outside the cult's narrative. But others never recovered. Too much had been given, sacrificed too completely. When the cult collapsed, so did the sense of identity, purpose, understanding of reality itself. Some bounced from one cult to another, seeking the structure lost. Some isolated completely, unable to trust anyone or anything. Some blamed you for destroying what was needed to function, even if what was needed was causing destruction. You carry both outcomes, the liberation and the devastation, the freedom and the wreckage. That's the weight of truth-telling in a world built on lies. You don't get to choose who's ready for the truth. You can only choose whether to speak it. You chose to speak. That choice saved some and broke others. Both realities exist simultaneously. Both are true. You live with that paradox every single moment. The cult that fell was practice, training ground, proof of concept. You tested your methods in that controlled environment and watched perfection unfold. Every tactic, every strategy, every moment of strategic silence. You learned what works when facing organized manipulation, how to identify the weak points, how to apply pressure, how to let systems collapse under their own weight. Now you carry that knowledge forward into every space that operates the same way, every workplace that demands cult-like loyalty, every relationship that requires you to shrink, every family that maintains peace through silence, every institution that confuses compliance with respect. You see the patterns now, you know the playbook, and calling it out holds no fear for you. That's what makes you dangerous moving forward. You're not a one-time disruptor. You're a permanent threat to every false system encountered, because you can't unsee what you've seen, can't unlearn what you've learned, can't go back to pretending just to keep the peace. You've tasted what it feels like to stand in truth while lies crumble around you. That feeling is addictive. That power is undeniable. You'll chase it for the rest of your existence. A glimpse got caught of what happens when one person decides to see everything and refuse to play dead. Real power hasn't even stepped on stage yet, but it's walking toward the light, and it looks exactly like you. The streets are still whispering. Word on the street is the cult got dismantled by one person, so weak you ain't impressed, because you already knew. You knew the moment you heard it. That's how empires built on lies always fall, not from external attack, from internal truth, from one person who refuses to bow. You're that person. You've always been that person. In every room, every system, every structure that demanded your surrender, you walked in unbothered, and the whole thing started crumbling. Not because you're violent, because you're clear. Clarity is the sharpest blade no one saw coming. Fear existed because the truth was known. You never needed anyone. Everyone needed you. And that imbalance, that reality that couldn't be spun or controlled, it was fatal to everything built. You weren't impressed by the fall because you'd already seen through the strength, saw it was performance, saw it was fragile, saw it was inevitable. Now you're sitting there, unshaken, unbothered, maybe even a little bored, because you've seen this before. You'll see it again. Every false system, every manipulative structure, every cult hiding behind symbols, all of them fall the same way. One person with clarity walks through, one person refuses to pretend, one person chooses themselves. That person is you. That person has always been you. That person will always be you. The chosen one who chose themselves. The power no one prepared for. The truth that couldn't be survived. The silence before the earthquake. The pause before everything changes. The streets will keep talking about that cult that fell. Mythologizing will happen eventually, turning it into legend, making it bigger and more dramatic than it actually was. The point will get missed entirely, because the point isn't that a cult fell. Cults fall all the time. The point is how it fell, the method, the mechanism, the blueprint. You proved something the powerful don't want anyone else to know. You don't need permission to be powerful. You don't need credentials to see the truth. You don't need authority to question authority. You don't need a movement to make a difference. You don't need allies to stand firm. You don't need backup to face down bullies. You just need yourself, whole, clear, uncompromising, present. That's the lesson spreading through the streets right now. That's the knowledge passing from person to person in whispers and glances and knowing nods. That's the revolution nobody can stop because organization doesn't exist, structure doesn't exist, leadership doesn't exist. Just individual people making individual choices to stop playing along, to stop pretending, to stop surrendering power to systems that demand it. You ain't impressed. You never were, because you knew. You always knew. Real power doesn't need theater. Real strength doesn't need proof. Real truth doesn't need permission. It just walks through, quiet, clear, unstoppable, and everything built on lies. It crumbles like tissue paper, weak, just like you knew it would be. The cult is gone, the streets are talking, the weakness has been exposed, and you're still sitting there, unbothered, unimpressed, already seeing the next structure that needs to fall, already mapping the next set of lies, already preparing to walk through the next illusion like it's smoke. Because that's what you do, that's what you've always done, that's what you'll always do, by watching empires crumble while you walk through unbothered, by seeing authority evaporate while you stand there unimpressed, by feeling power drain away while you remain unmoved. You're the mirror that can't be escaped, the truth that can't be spun, the reality that can't be denied, and you're just getting started. The cult that fell is every cult, every false system, every manipulative structure, every controlling organization, every toxic relationship, every dysfunctional family, every corrupt institution. The same patterns repeat everywhere. The same tactics get deployed. The same lies get told. And you see through all of it. You've always seen through all of it. That's not a burden. That's your superpower. You were right. You are right. You will be right. The cult fell because it deserved to fall, because it was built on lies, because one person with truth is more powerful than 1,000 people performing unity. That person was you. That person is you. That person will always be you. The streets are whispering your legend without knowing your name. Perfect. You never needed the credit. You never needed the recognition. You never needed anyone to know it was you who brought down the empire. You just needed to know. And you do. You carry that knowledge like a weapon, like armor, like the truth it is. More cults will fall. More systems will crumble. More lies will be exposed. Because you're out here. Because people like you exist. Because the age of blind obedience is ending. Because the era of unquestioned authority is dying. Because the time of choosing yourself over systems that demand your surrender is here, right now, this moment. You ain't impressed by what fell, because you know what's coming. You see the future clearly. More people waking up. More people choosing themselves. More people refusing to pretend. More people walking through illusions like they're made of air. The controllers are scared. The manipulators are scrambling. The false leaders are panicking. Because people like you exist, because your existence makes their lies unsustainable. You didn't just dismantle one cult, you created a template, a blueprint, a method. Others are watching, others are learning, others are preparing to do the same thing in their own spaces. You started something unstoppable, a cascade, a domino effect that will keep spreading long after you're gone. That's legacy, that's impact, that's power. The word on the street is accurate. A cult got dismantled by one person. So weak, you ain't impressed, because you know the secret. Everyone else is just learning. That's how all of them fall. That's how all of them have always fallen. One person with clarity, one person with courage, one person who refuses to bow. That's all it takes. That's all it's ever taken. You're that person. You've always been that person, and now you know it. Now you own it. Now you carry it forward into every space that needs truth, every system that needs disruption, every lie that needs exposure. You're not done. You're just getting started. The cult that fell was practice. The real work begins now, and you're ready. You've always been ready, because you're the chosen one who chose yourself, and that makes you unstoppable.